Hello, Professor and fellow OTL-603 classmates. As we prepare to conclude the semester, I'd like to share some of my learning experiences and how I intend to use this knowledge for future classes that I complete in the online teaching and learning program, as well as my communication studies courses at Northern Virginia Community College. Before I share some of these key points, I'd like to open up with a quote by Pablo Freire, an educator and philosopher, who stated, "Education does not change the world. Education changes people, and people change the world." So how does this apply to my learning experience in OTL 603? Well, through this course, I gained a lot of information about different technology and tools that I can integrate within my classes. But most importantly, thinking about the criteria that I should utilize to help me select the right technology and tools for my students. Therefore, through that education piece, I hope to be able to carefully consider the technology and tools that I integrate in my public speaking courses, my introduction to communication courses, asynchronous classes, hybrid classes, and synchronous classes as well. Furthermore, I hope to share this knowledge with my colleagues, especially when we group together and figure out what is our next textbook going to be, what platforms exist, and what applications are available to help our students grow within this field of communication studies. Through that education that we pass along to our students, we hope to go ahead and bring change to the community. And by that, I mean, I want my students to develop a love of learning, of a skill that they're going to be utilizing not just in their everyday lives, but also in the workplace. And so through the use of these technology and tools, I hope that the students will be able to develop that love of learning and also be able to recognize that some of these tools that we use in our class are tools that they may be using in future classes or consider using in their workplace as well. And this is how I hope that we will bring change to the world. So now looking back at my experience in OTL 603, there are three key items that I learned from this course. Number one is the criteria that I can use to evaluate tools and technology. When I started taking this class, I remember thinking about all of the different applications that exist. Kahoot Live, Kahoot Challenge, Quizlet. I also remember one of the activities that we completed where we were trying to figure out what are the best applications available for our own students. And we were able to narrow down based on the subject, the target demographic, and the type of learning that students would be doing. And once we received the results, I felt overwhelmed because I thought, well, this is wonderful that I'm able to see these different tools, but I don't know what's the right fit for my students. And so by understanding the different criteria that I can compose to really make the tools fit my student population, I'm able to adapt the tools and technology that we use to really enrich the students' learning experiences. So for the future, I look forward to examining, is the tool inclusive? Meaning, what is the cost of the tool? If students are unable to afford that tool, how might it impact their learning experience in the classroom? Are there any other alternative options available to using that tool, or is there any funding available from our college? Second, when we're looking at inclusiveness, I'm also going to be looking at accessibility. I want to make sure that students with disabilities are able to access the content in my classroom. If they have a visual impairment, will they be able to see the images that are presented on the modules? If they're unable to physically navigate through the pages, can they use the keyboard to go ahead and select tab or space to access the content for the class? The next criteria that I'll be examining is technical support. I want to make sure that not only myself, but my students have that support to be able to navigate through the different applications that we use in the classroom. When students enter a hybrid class or an asynchronous class, they're nervous by this new learning experience and the fact that they're going to be completing a speech in a communication studies class. So as a result, I want to make sure that whatever application we use for students to record their speeches, there's some type of support to help them when they're recording their presentation. So if they encounter some type of a challenge, let's say at 11:50 p.m. at night, there will be someone available to assist them, whether it is through a chat option or calling a support line. And finally, I want to make sure that the tool or the technology that we use is grounded in pedagogy. We aren't supposed to be selecting tools just because they seem like the next cool tool to use within the classroom. I have to look back at the big picture. How does this help my students achieve their student learning objectives or the core learning outcomes? By thinking back to the learning objectives or learning outcomes that we set for our students, I'm able to see how this tool or application will be able to help my students develop their communication studies skills. Second, I also learned about specific technology tools in the classroom, tools that I've heard existed, but I wasn't quite sure how to use them. When we completed the assignment on assessments, I learned more about Respondus Lockdown Browser, which is a tool that is used within my workplace, but I was unaware about the unique features that exist within this tool, specifically why it is used and how to access the reports as well. I also started examining what are some of the downsides or disadvantages of using this tool so that I'm able to start thinking of whether or not I want to integrate it within the classes that I design. The other tools that I learned about are Kahoot Challenge. While I've used Kahoot quizzes within my classes, I've never done it in challenge format. So I do appreciate my classes presenting this new format so that I'm able to assign it as an additional activity to test students' reading comprehension. And finally, I started exploring Jamboard. When I meet with my synchronous classes, I start using the whiteboard on Zoom, but I've recognized that it takes time away from the discussion because I'm trying to type away their ideas. So now what I've started doing is I have my students pop up their Jamboard, I share the link with them, and as they're in their breakout rooms on Zoom, they're entering their ideas. That way we can come back and openly discuss them. And I share that link with them, so that way they can continue to refer back to it and sharing any additional updates that they have for that class Jamboard page. Finally, the most valuable tool that I used and learned about this semester is CourseArc. I'd heard about it before, wasn't quite sure how it worked, and when we started using it in module number 2, I loved having the sidebar that let me know what items I needed to complete and the different type of activities that students could complete as well. I enjoyed designing the pages and looking at the different flashcards that we could complete, journal activities, and quizzes that we could set for students to, again, test their reading comprehension level. So how do I intend to use some of the content that we learned in this class in my classes? Well, I'm going back to CourseArc here. I want to be able to apply CourseArc to my asynchronous classes, specifically the dual enrollment classes that we work with for high schoolers at Northern Virginia Community College. Recently, I learned that we're going to be using open education resources instead of a textbook for the classroom. And we started diving in with OER this semester. There are various PDFs presented on Canvas, and then there's different activities for students to complete. And while everything is in an orderly, linear manner, I love the design that's presented on CourseArc. So I look forward to taking some of this content and translating that into the CourseArc module. I want students to be able to navigate and see what is coming up next as they are completing the reading assignment or an activity. And I also want to be able to use some of the tools to help them with their comprehension of the content. For instance, designing flashcards to help them understand the different types of barriers to perception or the challenges that we encounter to listening. Then I can use a quiz to go ahead and test their knowledge, and I can decide if I want to make it a graded quiz or an ungraded quiz or giving them multiple attempts. I can also use the survey icon to go ahead and get feedback on what did they think about this module? How helpful was the module? What are some ways that I can go ahead and improve this module for future students? Too often we wait for students to give us feedback until the very end of the semester. So by using that survey tool earlier, I'm able to start making those revisions sooner rather than later. So in conclusion, I'd like to go ahead and thank each and every one of you classmates for sharing your tools that you have used, teaching me how to use tools like Kahoot Challenge, looking at Flipgrid as well, and additional assessment tools. To our professor, thank you again so much for enlightening me on the unique tools that exist, and most importantly, for teaching me about the criteria that I must consider when I'm selecting a tool for my students. Because like I said before, it's not just about selecting the most snazzy or coolest tool out there. It's about making sure that it's student-oriented and that it's going to help my students grow in their learning experience.